Welcome to this morning's session on defending your brand budget. Today's session is going to be in English because I'm also streaming it on my YouTube channel. And if you want to have easy access to commenting, I'd suggest you move over there. You just go to YouTube and search for Jesper Ostrom. But otherwise, you can watch it on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're at. So today's session is going to be about defending your brand budget. And the topic came up when I was sitting and I was, having a bit of discussions on how to actually do some kind of, how do we actually prove that like investing in a brand, especially in a downslope that we're going in right now, why is that valuable? And as it seems, depending upon what types of brand activation or branding you do, you will have more or less success right now, especially in terms of keeping your prices high. But it's also a matter of that brand tracking, traditional brand tracking has been very much so focused on, doing interviews and doing surveys, using them for segmentation and things like that. But how can we actually follow up on a more shorter term and not having to, do those deep dive investigations? How can we sort of follow up what we do throughout the time that we are doing it? How can we sort of look at what activities actually led to something? Can we see, some changes in the demand for a brand? And so short-term focus here has been important to me as well, to try to dig out, into a full, stack of like a full funnel stack of metrics, trying to find different types of services that actually helps us answer those questions so that we can improve whatever it is that we do, or more importantly, understand whether or not what we do has any effect at all. Because although you can't see the long-term growth in the short term, well, you can, but although you can't really, determine whether or not the short-term growth will have a long-term effect in the short term, you will still be able to have an understanding of whether or not you're having any impact at all. So that's very important in the short term. What we're going to discuss today is a little bit about demand growth or demand forecasting and how to use the brand tracking in order to do some kind of demand forecasting. There has been some really interesting revelations lately that we in the SEO community came up with 15 years ago. No, but it's been really, the theory in this is going to be, has been really evolved over the past just year and a half. So we're going to dig into that. But more importantly, any kind of data, why I've invited the guest that we're having today, any kind of data becomes useless unless it's useful. And the most important way in which you can make something useful is if it's understandable and if it's beautiful. Because if it's beautiful, you manage to get both the people who are into visual stuff and people who are into the data, the Excel stuff in your organization. And I think that's very important. And when I met Rodrigo, who is the person who I've invited here, he showed me, he just sent me a report. Instead of us having a long chat, he just sent me a report where he had done this, he had looked through, he had created a report basically around the brand that I was working with, and which was Svea Solar and its competitors. And I could just browse through that and see where we were in sort of our sector. I could see okay, so this is in relation to our competitors. How much is our brand demanded? And I thought that the visualization there was really neat. So with no further ado, I'd like to bring in Rodrigo into the picture here. And welcome.
Hi, Jesper.
How are you doing
morning.
Today? Yeah,
I'm good, thank you. It's very nice to, I don't know, for you people in Sweden, you will know that it's stormy weather outside, so I have an excuse to be home. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna run these now. I'm gonna run these sessions now, quite often. I have another one on Friday and then another one on Tuesday. And I think what you showed me when we talked the first time was really something that I hadn't seen before. What you guys are managing to do with my telescope is to actually visualize search data, which and other data sources in a way in which I can see whether or not whatever I do has any impact or not. And so that's really what impressed me and what got me into wanting this. Like where the data comes from, yeah, we know the different sources, but then actually doing something with it that makes it actionable. But before we get into all of that, who are you, Rodrigo? Please.
Yeah, but thank you, Jesper, for having me. It's so nice to be here, part of your morning show. Who am I? Good question. But I'll start with, I mean, the short story of it. I started my career within finance in something called Morningstar, rating funds. So it had nothing to do with brands, people might think. But actually, funds is much more brands than anybody actually expects. If you think about a fund, it's a bunch of brands collected into one pot, and you hope them to grow. And that was kind of my realization working in that industry, is that, wait a minute, I like more the side of, driving demand for these kind of companies that are then into this fund. So I switched career into the creative side and started to work within PR. But I kind of missed the data side a bit too much, because I think when you're used to having the data constantly and knowing where the market is heading, and then you go into the world of brands where, yes, you can have data. It's not like the data doesn't exist, but it's not that accessible, and it takes quite some time before you get the data. So that's why we decided to kind of solve the problem in an easy way, to like, how can we prove to people that the money you're investing in your brand is actually driving top line growth. And I think that's been kind of a challenge for the, like, how do you say, marketing industry in general, that we see. Yes, we see the short-term conversions quite easily through attribution and other stuff, which is another discussion that people are having.
Yeah.
And then you see the long-term kind of demand that you're creating by investing in brands. And I think finally, for the first time, I think in like the history of brand building, we have a possibility to do it in an easy way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of shortly of me and my career and what we do with my telescope.
And what would you say has been like the biggest shift in the past? Like when would you say that this discussion was really starting?
I think maybe like 4 years ago. I remember the first presentation I made for a big burger chain, and I showed them the data. I didn't dare to say that it was search data I was showing as a brand indicator, because I felt that it was too easy. Yeah. Because people didn't really trust search in that sense, which I think is kind of stupid, because people are paying a lot of money to buy the traffic, but we don't trust it as an indicator, as a strategic indicator. No. And I think thanks to the kind of work that people like Les Binet, who, I don't know, for people who don't know who he is, he's the head of effectiveness at DDB, Adam & Eve DDB in the UK. You have other people like James Hankins, and now you have the professor Mark Ritson and others driving kind of like, how do you say, the knowledge of why search data can be used as an important strategic tool. I think that kind of started the discussion. And here in Sweden, I think it was a year ago, the Swedish Association of Advertisers, Sveriges Annonsörer, decided to put the metric share of search, which is basically the tracking of your competitive searches versus your competitors, as a business metric for marketing. So I think that kind of, and rolled that out through all the advertisers in Sweden. And this was a year ago. So now I think the discussion has just started. I think it's very early on, but you can see a lot of stuff happening. In the US, for example, you have a company called EDO. Yeah. They run all the TV commercials. They measure them through search data, for example, to understand if they have created an impact or not, which has also been a big discussion, does TV work? Doesn't it work? And so on and so forth. And I think you have worked with search, it, that yes, of course, if you run a TV ad, you will see an increase in searches. For sure. But people still say that TV doesn't work. So I don't know why, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, it's been one of my most classic examples when I want to pull down some laughs from the audience. It's an old TV ad in Sweden where a Swedish hip hopper says, you get a bike when you buy. And then we took like the narrow bike, like exact match on bike when you buy, and then we put it into to look what the search demand was when this TV spot was running. And we found out that, people were searching for exactly bike when you buy. Now, they were repeating this like tons of times in that ad, but when we looked in Google, they weren't buying the the Google ads for that, and they weren't ranking on it. Actually, it was one of their competitors, like one of their old offers where they also offered some kind of bike when you buy. And it was just like, and I was talking in conferences, I was talking to them directly, and I was like, why don't you fix this? and it wouldn't really go through, So I think that, like, from my point of view, I think that I've always had a pedagogic problem here in like explaining this. Now, the difference came like when I showed what you guys are doing to my stakeholders internally. They were like, yeah, I get this. This is beautiful. It was such a helpful tool for me in order to just be able to even though I could show, previously the Google Trends graphs, it was like they were not real because there was no actual search volume on them. It's like, what is an index? And as soon as you get into like even discussing share of search or an index, or whenever it goes into anything of that, it becomes too complicated for someone who's not really into like what's quality in data, So
and I think I suppose it's like everything. I think my kind of, when I go back to what in my career and I look at what made, for example, Morningstar big, was the simpleness of making stars to show a good fund has more than 3 stars and the bad fund has less. I mean, it's very quite, as a binary, quite
binary,
straightforward binary in the answer. And I think here's kind of the same, is that if you go into, say, other tools where you look at data and you see lines and you don't understand what they mean, why should you believe them? And I think all of the buzzwords around data, I think that's what makes life complicated. I kind of think about it as, health trackers. I don't know if you do any running or any.
Sure.
I'm trying to get back to it. So now, of course, I'm becoming a nerd again of looking at my pace and
fast,
but it's not like I compare myself to others. I'm just looking at myself, right? I mean, you want to understand, am I improving my own heartbeat and breath and all of that, so in lung capacity. And I think that's kind of where we need to start here as well. I think it's all about starting to understand the value of tracking your own brand performance and understanding, okay, if I put in some money into my brand, what happens? Or if I think when we get into the situation where we're in this market now, I don't know, can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
I think I just do it. I think it's,
you just go to present and there you add your screen, and I will add it to everyone. Is it theory time?
Some theory time. I think sometimes you talk about stuff and all of a sudden it's like, but we have something to show here, so let's do it in that way instead. I think here it's kind of straightforward. You have a brand. I mean, this is the performance curve that you were talking about, Jesper. Like, this is the brand's curve, and all of these like kind of buckets are the campaigns they have done during the year. And these 42, 64, 26 is here at the starting point. They had 100% budget. And then their financial department said, you know what, we're going to cut the budget with 42%. What happened with the brand? It declined. Then in May, they said, we're going to, cut with 64. Then with 26, the problem was that, yes, you've already started, to cut your budget. So all of a sudden you start, it's much, much expensive to get back, right? To the normal levels again. And this is kind of what happens, when you see, and then they started to increase again, you start to see that they start to grow and so on and so forth. So it's kind of, if you think about it, something we've talked about for ages, like if you put some money in, you will see growth. If you don't put money in, you will see decline. It's not that hard. So, okay, what happened then if you look at the same curve in compared to your competitors? You see here how, the brand lost market share during that period of time. Because all the others kind of kept their own levels. So due to the fact that you did not convince your maybe your financial team to keep the budgets or whatever reasons, you will have a problem where you see a very volatile journey in your growth, which is, of course, if you think about it, it becomes super expensive to get back on track to your normal levels.
And I want to get into something here that is a detail, but I think it's kind of important. I mean, when people look at these, like one of the things that is, I know what's still being discussed is whether or not it is the mere volume or if it's the change that is the important thing. Like if the demand for your brand changes negatively or positively, that's more important indicator than like where your volume started from, let's say. Do you have anything to expand on there? Is that a true assessment or is it false?
Yes and no, I suppose. I think, I mean, a change, of course, will be a change in volume, right, in comparison to what you're having.
Yeah.
But of course, you might have seasonal effects that I know, for a fact that the burger chains, people are searching for them more. I think during the summer, because I suppose they're on the road, so they're looking for the one nearest me. At least in Sweden. So of course the volumes will be higher. So of course at first glance it's the changes in the curve that's most important. Yeah. But of course the volume is important. If you think about a brand, let's say your brand Jesper compared to the brand of Stefan Löfven, this is a former Swedish prime minister. His search volumes will probably much higher than yours. So of course your comparison is going to be, from a volumes point of view, is going to have a bit of a challenge if you're starting to look at yourself as the next prime minister of Sweden. However, of course, his numbers are on decrease. And if you say that you're going to become the next prime minister, you might because you're so good at driving growth, maybe you'll probably see increasing volumes. So the change will be driven by volume as well.
Right. And when we say volume, we have a question here from Anneli here. She asked, like, what KPI are you showing in the previous slide? What is the KPI that we're showing there?
So here's the search volume that we're looking at. So it's the search volume for search, and then there's a correlation between search data and sales data with an average of 0.81, which means that every time a brand lift goes up, there is 81% chance, let's say, that your sales will follow. Yeah. The rest, the 19%, means that you might have a problem with, say, your distribution, your pricing. So it's basically a conversion problem. We had a discussion yesterday with a brand that have three business models. They have one that is direct, one that is through wholesale, and one that is through kind of more retail. Yeah, you could see, for example, when you have direct sales, the correlation between sales numbers and your search volume numbers is 91%. When you have kind of more retail, it's around 80, 81, 83. And when it's through wholesale, it goes down to 56 because, of course, they buy in bulk. On the other hand, you can see the trend line moving ahead. So the cool thing is that kind of a lot of people, I think that a lot of brands or companies don't have primary data, right? They have a hard time. If you think about if you're selling through retail or wholesales, you actually don't know your exact sales numbers, because it's data you don't have, because you only get maybe one sale per year, a big chunk, right? And you want that because it gives you a lot of cash in the beginning of the year, and then you know that in a year from now you're gonna, you can kind of plan your production. By this line, and following search data, you will know if your sales can increase next year, for example, or not. So in that sense, you get the prediction for the next coming year to know if you have to increase your production, yes or no. So I think that's kind of if you're a brand, it's fantastic to know, am I good at utilizing the money I'm investing in activities to drive top line growth? Yeah. And not only in the short term, but also like in a year from now. But if you are, say, an agency looking at this, you want to know, okay, this brand came to me with this bag of money to invest to drive growth. Am I good doing so?
Yeah. And I think that one of the more important things is just to reiterate that like what has actually been proven now statistically is that this sort of works, that it is a true relationship. And so this, like, we've made assumptions previously, and we've seen that this correlates to stock price, which, you know, is a long-term metric for you know, whatever goes into the pricing of that. So we've used it in the financial, like, markets to project, you know, what is demand for this and how can we hedge different types of stocks. But we haven't really been able to truthfully say that the case is that this is actually a forecast of future sales. Like, if the demand for my brand grows today, I will have future sales that are increasing. And so I could plan for perhaps increasing my production capacity or increasing my investment to gain more market share or something like that, because I will be able to, let's say I'm thinking of, because this has a 6-month lag in most industries, it seems as though it had. So if I know that in 6 months my sales are going to go up, but in 6 months it's November or December, and November and December is pretty damn expensive advertising months, then I could probably pre-invest in more advertising now to actually build up my bulk for those months that are super important, especially to all retailers. Not having to go to Black Friday with an offer that rips me off. So it's like combining this with tactics that actually that, you know, just getting this information and knowing that it's an indicator of something true in terms of this, like sales, or in terms of which of interest for employment, which is also like a big thing here, I think. Or if you're a startup, showing that the demand for us, you know, is in the future it will be higher, and thus we can actually prove our models that look like hockey sticks now.
I think I think kind of like with everything, I suppose that if you're a smaller brand, these curves will become more volatile depending, because it's, I mean, if you're a small brand, big brand, as you say, you have probably already invested so many years in building that knowledge of your existence. Well, if you think about the brand that we just looked at before, that was very, very volatile, it's a quite unknown brand, so they're quite dependent on having a constant investment in the brand. But as you say, I think one of the what I think is kind of interesting is that you can actually now have an intelligent discussion with your finance department, not only saying, you know what, trust my gut feeling, because this is, you know, if we invest more now, I will sell more. And you know what, we can actually save money because we don't have to buy ads in the most expensive months. We can actually, as you say, buy ads in, say, November, or not November, sorry, October, or maybe Jan, let's say, instead, if we're going to sell for the summer, let's say. And if I spoke to a CFO in the US, they actually use this to plan cash flow. Because if you think about it, the marketing department is kind of the few that has kind of cash that they can move around quickly, that is not fixed capital. Because if you think a production line, once you decided to start building your product, the money is stuck. You bought all the utilities, you have all your staff. Once, if you're ICA in Sweden, I don't know how much media money they spend each year, but let's say 100 million Swedish or 200 or whatever that media spend is. That is cash you could move around within the company if needed. So by having this type of data and looking at it, you can, as you say, you know what, let's reduce a bit of the investments in December, but let's put some of that money in September instead. So you are actually going to buy more impressions, build a, you know, kind of share of brand in somebody's head, and then we can use, of course, December, not cutting it totally, but keep on having people top of mind, of course, because in the end, it's like everything.
We have another question from Anneli here, which builds on that. You know, like, are you saying how much people search for the brand equals drive sales, or?
That's what I'm saying. So basically, over time, the search has a very strong correlation to sales.
Yeah, so it's more like an indicator. It's not like the search in itself drives the sales, but it's a consequence of something like your reputation being higher, people talking about you more. You've done some advertising activities, so whatever. Like what we're saying here is that if the search volume increases, something has happened that will affect your sales in the future, and like for the marketing department, then it becomes to analyze and break this down, because like with the snow outside, I'm sure that people are searching for Mekonomen today, but that will not be a result of some branding activity, but it's it's forced by some other thing. So the job here, now that we have correct data that can project this or forecast the coming sales, is then to actually break that down into what had we actually done to make this change happen.
But if you think about it, what you just said, they're going to go out there and look for Mekonomen.
Yeah.
Why did they,
for
there's
sure.
a lot of other brands that they could search for. Why Mekonomen?
Yeah,
so obviously for you, it was top of mind that, if I'm going to buy something to get out of with my car from my garage or whatever, I would go to say Mekonomen. Maybe for me it's Biltema, for someone else it's OK or Q8 or whatever. So what I mean is that obviously the investment they previously made in showing that they have the tools you need when it's snow outside, you're going to think about them and you're going to search for them. Maybe not for Mekonomen, you're going to maybe search for Mekonomen near me, because you want to know how close it is to actually buy. So the cool thing with analyzing search data is that some words will of course be much closer to the actual sales moment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, if you go and look at Lidl, let's say on search data today, you will probably see a lot of people looking for Lidl near me, Lidl price.
Yeah.
Which maybe a year ago, before the economical situation in Sweden, people wouldn't, because they just went to their nearest shop, because they were not thinking about their wallet in the same way.
Maybe. Yeah. No, but so yeah, but just another question here from Anneli. It's like, so are you saying that brands should generally should invest more in SEO or building a brand? I'm saying like so these are two things that you should be investing in, because one, you want to harvest that demand for your brand that has been created, but that will probably not happen unless you have some strong PR activities, some strong brand advertising, and probably a functioning product that doesn't dissatisfy people too much. And so these three things are super important to invest in. And SEO is sort of the nethoven, as I say. It's where you capture this demand. So like, especially now in times when we need to sort of pull down, I'd say that it's more. I can't say this with 100% certainty, because it's not true for all brands, because some brands are in serious competition, and they are not. They haven't worked on their brand enough to be distinct enough to actually make an impact or be visible in the competition. Mm-hmm. But if they have, done the prerequisites of actually being a distinctly different brand, and that can actually that gets noticed, then I'd say that the best strategy I see now is brand and SEO, because it's about building and then capturing, and that goes. That goes for App Store. I was looking through. I was trying to find good ways for like apps and to grow on those rankings in the App Store, and from the experiments that we tried, it's actually the same there. It's just understanding that there is a little bit more of like old school SEO that goes into ranking in the App Stores. But
I don't know. I'm not a good. I don't know enough about SEO and everything about that, so that whatever I say will be wrong, I suppose. But my assumption is that the brands that are stronger have a cheaper cost of acquisition when it comes to getting the conversion from SEO, I suppose. Because I mean, if I'm going to choose between a known brand and an unknown brand, when I'm gonna, buy in the end, I will probably most likely choose the one that I know will stand there. And I suppose and I think onto the question on like, should I invest, as you say, Jesper?
Yeah.
If you're unknown, why should anybody click on you? And the problem is I think the cool thing with SEO is that you can actually build brand also in SEO. I mean, because if I, for example, we have this idea that we are going head to head towards the opinion companies and survey data. So, for example, every time anybody searches for brand surveys or brand lift studies, we have this no more opinion polls, no more surveys as kind of a pop-up coming up on the search to get people to drive traffic to my telescope and get them to understand. We know that's not going to get them to buy from us, but at least it's going to start building our point of view on why it's better to look at brand performance with search data instead of asking people questions. And I'm not saying you should either off, but I think the problem is that a lot of people, actually very few, buy brand tracking if you think about the totality. So I think the challenge is in general that most companies or brands don't track brand performance. They're kind of navigating blindly. And I think people that have sailed would never go out sailing when it's dark if they don't have maybe a compass and a kind of like a map to understand where they're heading. And that's kind of what people are doing with their brands. So I think a lot of companies are, how do you say, not very responsible in how they're utilizing their money.
No.
So if I was the CFO, I would actually also cut the budget, because nobody have ever been able to give me a proper explanation on why I should invest more, except that I should trust you as a person. But there's been no actual data to show me, like, look here, like the graph I showed you before. Look what happened when we cut the budgets. This happened, and this is correlated to sales. So we know that 3 months later, their sales actually dropped. So then, of course, they had to increase their budgets again, because all of a sudden everybody was screaming because their top line and bottom line was shrinking.
And that's a story that's been told so many times, but to know that it's true for us, it's a harder cookie to chew, if that is an expression. But
I think a lot of people don't, as you say. One thing is what I say, and one thing is what I show. And I can just show. I think it's kind of interesting. I'll show from our tool again. I think because there, I mean, as you said, that's where we started. But if you think about, here's Jameson, the whiskey brand, and the reason why I'm showing this one is because a lot of people don't they're like, but people don't trust everything. People, they don't search for stuff that is whiskey or whatever. If you look at Jameson, this is Jameson in the US. If you look at their line, it's kind of flat, but you can see kind of two bumps here. And they are a brand run, I think it's Diageo running them. And they just came out on marketing week last week that they're actually going to increase their budgets into brand spend, because they have seen a year-on-year growth on their brand with 40%. So that's kind of impressive. And if you see these two bumps, you want to know, okay, what created these? And if you look at this, the first one here was St. Patrick's Day, where they made a campaign to get people to choose them. And here was another one, a Christmas promotion that they made. But if you think about it, their increase started already before. So in the beginning of the year, they had a search volume of 168,000, and now they have around 202,000. So you can see an increase, just in volume, just in interest. And you can also see the change, what happened during the Christmas promotions. Can you see the same change with the other brands? Of course you can. You can see that St. Patrick's, Jameson's was much better in exploiting, if you compare it to, say, Jack Daniels and Crown Royal Whiskey. During Christmas, they all had kind of their natural bumps due to Christmas. What's interesting here is to see, because this is just looking at the pure lines of search volume. What happens when you look at the share of search? And here and that's actually, are they capturing market share basically in the market? And you can see here how they took market share. You can also see that slowly but surely, over Christmas, remember that they all had bumps? you can see that the one that actually took the most increase during Christmas was actually Crown Royal whiskey.
Yeah.
So I think here's but then Jameson is coming back and taking market share from both of Jack Daniels and Crown Royal. So basically, I think what they did maybe during Christmas is that they didn't do as much communication. They were working, as you say, and it was smarter to start working on communications in Jan when it was cheaper on the market to actually do anything, when the rest of them stopped.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of proves your point, and also how easy it was for me to just, to create this. It's very, very simple, because I just create my brand by putting the brand names in here, and then it gives me the search volume, and I just then get a tracker.
Yeah, and I think that because one of the biggest difficulties here that we had when we were working with trying to track brands such as Sweden or words that are not necessarily being used specifically for demand in a country, is that like what I could do with your tool is I could add negatives, like these ones should not be included in the. So when I went through, for example, I use a tool called Answer the Public in order to get what kind of things are people searching for right now associated with my brand or associated with any topic, and then I could add those as negatives into the system here, but it's so it understood that things related to this should not be included. I think that's kind of the feature that does it, because it sort of mimics the way that we've been working with Google Ads campaigns over the years in order to narrow them down to be solely focused on sales or
and I think
or whatever we are looking at.
For example, I know there's a campaign in the US running for Toronto. People they want Americans to visit Toronto.
Yeah.
I, to be honest, don't know much about Toronto and how Americans would choose to do it. So I've actually started to use ChatGPT for this. So I prompted ChatGPT and asked to create a tracker on Toronto and what people think is interesting from the US. Especially if they live in New York. And ChatGPT answered me and said, there's a lot of interest and blah, blah, blah. These are the things people want to do. They want to visit restaurants. They want to do this, and this. And you get a lot of explanations. The places most Americans visit if they don't go to Toronto is Vancouver. So it's good to track against Vancouver, for example.
Yeah.
So it was a good way to jumpstart and then know, which kind of, keywords to choose when building a tracker like this. And here you can also see, for example, that they have made campaigns on TikTok, and you can see kind of what happened during that period of time. And I know they made a campaign here in TikTok, and you can see that you start to see a lift, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if one final thing I think is super important here is in terms of looking at these trends and looking at the different patterns, and I like to use like search data in order to verify hypotheses about segments, right? So so if we have an idea that one of our segments that we're going to target has this kind of interest, it should show up somehow either around, if we want to target this segment and we are doing it with our advertising, the searches, the variations in the searches should sort of mimic the needs of that group. So if we've been good at triggering that need with emotional advertising, then that should actually show up in search one way or another. Or if we want to understand our target audience more, looking at the kind of more anxiety level search queries that are asked around the brand to understand whether or not people are unsure, if people are super sure, if they're combining our purpose with some like bigger goal or something like that. I think that search data sort of gives you an indication as to whether or not your hypothesis about your segment is correct. And then, I'm sure like one of the things that I don't know if I could use your tool, but which I'm happy to ask now, is to track those kinds of. So I would like to, instead of doing brands, I'd like to take my 5 segments, and if I know what keywords they would be searching for, would it be possible to create like 5 segments around my own brand and track them against each other?
Yeah. I mean, our biggest user of our tool is Vattenfall.
Yeah.
And they use it to actually track interest in general in questions related to climate change or, other kind of, how do you say, kind of interest areas within their universe where they're wanting to build their brand. So I think, we're talking a lot now about branding, but of course, search data, as you say, what's so beautiful with search data in general is that it's behavior, right? You're looking at behavior. So in that sense, and I think also now, I think people have had an obsession of looking at behavior from a segmentation point of view when it comes to demographics, instead of actually looking at the world through the lens of interest and what people are interested in. And I think what's cool with search data is that you can create those, how do you say, trackers based on trends, interest trends that people might be looking for and that you want to kind of follow over time as well, both to create content, but also to maybe position your company or to know if there's a specific question or opinion you should be driving at this given moment. So, our tool in that sense, what we have done is that we're taking data sources that already exist. We're not inventing anything. It's an automation. You basically put in whatever keywords you want to put in, and then every week, every month, the data will be pulled, and you will have a beautiful graph where you can see, and we also have ways of sharing it easily with friends or colleagues.
Yeah.
So, I used it privately to, track stuff like to understand from stuff that I'm interested in. I'm very into hip hop. I want to understand if it's other trends and music. When I was younger, I used to kind of follow my friends that were DJs. Now I have to kind of really be part of following some specific keywords to see if there's anything cool things happening. That probably says my age more than anything else, but but that's kind of how I use it as well. So of course, it's brand, but you can see a topic as kind of like a brand as well, right?
Yeah. Cool. We have a 30-second delay in this, so I'd just like to, if those of you who want to ask, if you want to ask any questions to Rodrigo or I before we go, it's time to put those questions in now. We received a few throughout here that we've answered throughout, but just like so one of what, as I said in the beginning of this video, one of the things that I'm really keen on doing here is to start to really applying these types of insights into like what we actually do, because like from my point of view, and this should not like fall on you in any way, shape or form, but from my point of view, I think that the discussion around like branding and around like brand communication has sort of derailed a little bit from what the theory actually says into just being about making pretty things. And I think that we can really see in this, when someone has done a huge investment, reach and frequency matters. Reach and frequency in your logo matters in order to create demand for your brand. But when we see someone really, do something that is different, that really puts them out there amongst the brands in their competition, then that's what actually has some really powerful effect. And so, giving it also as a tool to help people dare to, like, it's a good benchmark. Like, you can really see, like, oh, they did something really not common, then that should be valued, And I think that maybe
I think it's like with data, it's scary because I mean, if you think about it, you might have a hypothesis on what you want to do and the idea you might have, and say if it doesn't work, and then all of a sudden the data actually, your beautiful idea was too early or something for the market, right? So maybe people were not ready for your beautiful idea. And I mean, for startups, you see that all the time, and these startups go bankrupt, or they have to wait until they actually get their lift up.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to beautiful ideas, when it comes to creative work, it's the same thing. Sometimes it's either too early for the market, or that the customer or the brand paying for it don't dare to put the money behind it. Yeah. To actually drive both the reach frequency plus having an idea to back it. So I think, yes, creativity, what we've seen with all these trackers we've created is that beautiful ideas do win on the market. They get more effectiveness than the ones that just use media spend and not the creative thinking. But I think it's like everything. You have to combine both having a good plan for what type of media to buy and invest in, but also have, of course, a good partner, or if you have an in-house agency, to create material that actually grasps people's attention and creates interest. Because in the end, this is what it's kind of looking for. Did you create interest, yes or no? And interest you can create in either buying media or doing stunts to grasp that attention.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, we haven't received any questions now. I'm sure that they will end up on the YouTube video. I will post the link to for those of you who want to watch this, like or save this down or share this with anyone. You know, I am going to share the link to the YouTube video in the comments, and you know, just put any comments there, and I'll ping Rodrigo if there is a question that I think that he will be more suitable to answer. But with that, you know, thank you so much, Rodrigo, for joining me this morning, and I hope to do this again at some point when we start getting a lot of you know, things in.
And yeah, thank you for having me. And I will use your time for to get people into my telescope.io, and they have a 7 days trial where they can actually start testing this themselves. So
there's an offer. Thank you. Finally, a Swede who sells something.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, we actually have one. We actually have one question here. Would you say that branding budget should be put into campaigns, short-term projects, or as long-term investment that gets everything a company do and is about? What should companies do? Right. So from a tactical point of view, I'd say that this is, or from a strategic point of view, I think that, I mean, Johan has probably written something about it. It seems like it here. Branding versus marketing, maintaining consistency while balancing short-term and long-term goals. So I would actually recommend you. He posted that comment on LinkedIn associated to this video, but I'm gonna lift that into the comment section of the YouTube video as well, because I think that he, out of all the people I know, he's the person that I respect the most in terms of like strategic branding. So I'm sure that whatever he's written here while he's been listening, I'm sure it's good. so and it seems as though it would answer your question there, Mia, as well.
But also, Mia, I mean, one of the guys behind all of this theory is Les Binet, and he is actually one that him and Peter Fields wrote the book, The Short and the Long of It. And I think what they say, it's and the long, so it's not versus. And I think that's kind of crucial. I think a good campaign always should be building the brand over time. Then you might have an offer there because you want to have short-term conversion. But you always have to be very strong on the brand, because that's what's going to stick out.
All right. Well, once again, thank you so much, Rodrigo, for joining us and joining us. I say as though I'm more than one person. It sounds better, right?
Sounds big.
Yeah, the TV channel, Elsa.com.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I had to say to my daughter this morning. I was joining a TV, that's why I couldn't leave her at school.
Yeah, that's good. Have a good day.
Have a nice one.
Yeah,
bye.
Bye.